panelists, let me quickly set the context as to why we conceptualized this session in the first place. Right, so product security as a domain or as an ecosystem, I would say, DSCI has been taking an ecosystem approach to this overall concept of product security, wherein we have been trying to bring together different aspects, looking at or taking a more lifecycle approach as to how products are getting developed, the scale, the velocity, and the volume at which products are getting developed, especially the digital products, and to look at various stages, what are the various security considerations. I remember in 2023, DSCI hosted a sub-summit around product security, wherein we brought together stakeholders from different domains, be it the OEMs, be it the capability providers, be it the developers of products. That sub-summit was looking at the product security from a holistic standpoint, sector-agnostic standpoint. In fact, the cyber-physical systems also figured in that conversation to a great extent. So we thought, why not to apply those learnings and see how financial sector reacts to it? Because by virtue of our interaction with several fintechs, with several user organizations, organizations are actually rallying together the support in order to strengthen their product security teams. Because product security has a very, very specific charter, right? It's not like run-of-the-mill security aspects which are being taken care of, which are duly important, but product security has its own charter, I would say. Right, so with that intent in mind, DSCI had conceptualized this particular session. So, Rajshri, let me start with you. Having that extensive experience with Finacle and, of course, the overall past experience. So, what would be your comment on how overall, product development from the digital financial space, how it's panning out, and especially, if you could focus on, the scale, the speed at which financial products are being churned out. Right, that's very, very important. So even before we jump into the security aspects, I think it's important for us to set the context as to how financial sector has been playing on this part. Right.
Thank you, Aditya. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we as a panel have a very tough task on hand in terms of keeping you all engaged and away from your mobile phones. I understand we have a thriller match going on with the election results. But we will do our best. My name is Rajshri Rangan. I flew from Chennai, all the way from Chennai to Mumbai to be a part of this session because I think the topic of today's session and the entire conclave is very, very important from product security and a cyber security standpoint in the country. I have around 30 years of experience. I spent the first decade of my career as a banker. So I understand the banking and financial services sector very well. And the last couple of decades, I've been in the product development space. developing products for the banks and financial institutions all across the globe. And now I'm the head of product development for Infosys Finacle. Finacle is a market leader as far as the banking sector in India is concerned. I read the annual report by the Reserve Bank of India that was released just last week. The report says that in India, in the last financial year, credit card frauds and online scams increased by 334%, whereas during the same tenure, digital payments went up by just 40%. You look at the comparison, right? Digital payments go up by 40%, but the online frauds go up by 334%. Money lost as a result of these scams grew 5 times to almost 1,500 crores. And these scams are not because of any system breach or an application breach. They are the result of online frauds and phishing scams where an innocent account holder, they are tricked to reveal any confidential information or they click a fraudulent link to make a payment. I also read a report by a top consulting firm that talks about globally that says that financial institutions are 300 times more vulnerable to cyber attacks than any other industry. And they spend 40% more money and effort to remediate a cyber attack. It is a no-brainer because banks and financial institutions today sit on a landmine of data, and which is very, very attractive for financial gains by an attacker. I was speaking to my friend who's a CISO in a top global bank based in the US. He was saying that even 5 years before, as a CISO, he would at best meet with the board of directors for around 20 minutes as part of every year as part of a AGM or a general meeting. But in the last 2 to 3 years, He is facing the board of directors almost every month for 30 minutes. Overall, in terms of monetary value, cyber crimes have overtaken illegal drug trafficking. So that is the exponential problem that we are talking about today. Let us see how banks have evolved. During my time, when I started my career as a banker, almost 100% of customer interactions happened within a branch, in a brick and mortar segment. We had customers who were walking into the branch, doing cash transactions, remittances, taking a loan, whatever. Around late 90s and 2000s, when branch automation and bank automation caught a lot of steam, 50% of the clients still used to come to the branch for their interactions, whereas 50% moved to traditional banking channels like ATMs, call centers, phone banking, etc. And today, 75 to 90% of client interactions with a bank happens via the bank-owned digital channels, mobile banking, online banking. When was the last time any of us walked into a branch physically to do a transaction? I'm sure all of us forgot when we did that. In the future, there will be another transformational shift where we expect more than 50% of the transactions of a client will come via marketplaces and ecosystems. Open banking, open payments, embedded finance, buy now, pay later, banking as a service, and whatnot. So this opens up a very unique blend of opportunities, challenges, and future outlook. In terms of challenges, regulatory compliance is going to be the number one. Regulators across the world are grappling with the fact as to how they can protect the interest of the consumers and the retailers and the common man. The European Union very recently passed the EU AI Act. They are trying to come up with a regulation on how to regulate AI within the European Union. The US came up with a similar study very recently. We know the digital lending guidelines, data privacy guidelines by the Reserve Bank of India here. The next challenge is, of course, cybersecurity. As digital adoption expands, cybersecurity will continue to be on top of every boardroom's agenda. The next is legacy modernization. In spite of all the emerging technologies, more than 50% of banks and financial institutions globally still run on mainframe, still run on on-prem infrastructure. So that is a huge challenge on how we are going to modernize legacy systems. In terms of opportunities, I see a huge opportunity for financial inclusion. Millions and millions of people are going to come from underbanked and unbanked areas, thanks to the telecom 5G, 6G revolution into the digital banking world. Technology will play a very important role in financial inclusion. The next is efficiency gains. AI, ML, data-driven insights. Everything is a huge opportunity for banks and fintech vendors that are operating in this space. The future outlook, as far as I'm concerned, we will see banks trying to become fintechs, fintechs trying to become banks, and the lines between them blurring. There will be a lot of democratization of emerging technologies, blockchain, crypto, digital assets, so on and so forth, becoming digital currencies, CBDCs, being more accessible to the common man. Due to the democratization of AI, the customer will become the king once again. There will be hyper-personalization. A lot of products will be evolved, keeping the end user or the end customer experience in mind. I guess the future is very challenging, but I'm sure it is as interesting as challenging it is.
Thanks, Rajshri. So I think the overall what you mentioned is that the financial transaction processing is getting unbundled, right? With the entry of so many players, and of course, the digital public infrastructure, UPI, enabling that to a great extent. Right, so thanks for that. So Naveen, let me come to you. Being the CISO of a fintech, right, and of course carrying that vast experience from a security standpoint, and you have also been into product development, greater part of your life. So for the audience, because product security as a fancy term is fine, but if you were to even go as far back as defining product security for the financial sector, I'm not talking about in general. I'm not talking about the hardware part of it. I'm not talking about the cyber physical, but for financial sector, what product security actually means. This is part one. And secondly, if you were to touch upon some of the dimensions of product security, what would those dimensions be?
Good afternoon, everyone. So coming to your question, right? I come from fintech background, primarily from a fintech offering supply chain finance platform. So if you look at all the products or platforms which fintech actually creates, right? Those are service-oriented, primarily API-based service-oriented architecture, then cloud native, mostly born on cloud. So primarily when we talk about product security, there are multiple aspects to it, right? One is the application security as such.
Yeah.
The code you develop, how you integrate security into the code development itself, whether you use third-party softwares and libraries, whether those has inherent vulnerabilities or gaps within it, whether you take care of that aspect. Then you may be hosting it on cloud, right? There comes the infrastructure security, because you need to have a lot of security configurations to be enabled on your cloud infrastructure to ensure your infrastructure itself is hardened, right? Then it comes, you may be hosting the platform on a containerized environment, because everybody needs Microsoft, that you hardcode any secrets, right? Keys or secrets. Then it can actually scan and identify whether you are using what is the latest version to which you may need to upgrade. Then if you are actually using, let's say, Git or any kind of source code repository, right? That repository posture is important. So repository posture scanning would be another aspect to it. Then the other is, if you are using, let's say, container-based orchestration, then image needs to be scanned, whereby either you can do it in the image itself or on the runtime itself you can do it. So everything actually orchestrated together with intelligence and interoperability offered as a service is something currently available in the market. A lot of fintechs like Credible are leveraging those services, because you won't build everything, right? You build only the IP. That makes sense for your business. Anything that's already being built by somebody who put the effort and build something, then we buy it, right? So that's exactly what a fintech, a new age fintech would be doing, whereby they build their AP, they buy these kind of capabilities into their ecosystem to ensure application security, API security, infrastructure security as a whole is integrated into their product, so that when you offer that product to, let's say, a customer, primarily we offer these products to banks, right? Then it goes through their scrutiny, because banks are mandated by the RBI guidelines in India ecosystem, right? It talks about a lot of security controls. So we need to ensure these are incorporated into the product development, and this is how we actually achieve that.
Absolutely. So I think the important thing, and thank you for that, is that you alluded to the software supply chain part of it, right? So the software supply chain security is something that I intend to, when I come back to you for the next question, I would be taking that up. For the time being, Rajesh, since at the beginning we promised to talk about a lifecycle approach, right? So whether it is the design and architecture of the product, right? Whether it is, even the product testing piece of it, or the overall development. So I want you to really, just educate the audience in terms of, how product security can be comprehended taking a lifecycle approach, right? So your comments on that.
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Coming to the question, I believe when any product is being developed, right, the most important aspect is that how do you want to inherit security into the overall product lifecycle, right? And how can I enhance the level of security protocols during the entire life cycle when I'm developing this product? That is an important aspect that every developer or every manufacturer needs to think when they are developing these products, right? So when this development of the product happens, there are multiple stages that the product goes through it. The most important stage is at the start itself, when you are working on the design part, right? In the design part itself, if you have the relevant security teams involved in those discussions, which can help us to understand that what is the business objective for what we are developing this product. That helps them to understand that how we can ingrain security into the overall product portfolio, right? So that's a very, very important aspect, that you involve those security mindset when you are developing these products. The second aspect of this part is that when you are actually developing the code, there's always a quality assurance that comes into the picture. And I've seen of late that there are separate quality assurance team that has defined steps when they are developing the code, where they are reciprocative for the feedback that they take before it is moved to the testing phase or moved into the production phase also, right? So that is where you actually identify that how the product is being developed, whether we have the right set of functionalities, what the business demands, what the consumers demand, right? All those features have been fitted into that, but at the same time also am I having visibility and control on the product, right? Because in the end, if I had to give be my layman's example. If I am selling a product to any consumer, and if the consumer doesn't know how the product is secure, then it brings a bad name, right? Rather than that, I would focus on what are the security ingredients that I can put into the product before it is pushed even into the assembly line, right? Forget about going into the quality or the testing phase, right? So once we actually start developing the code, it is absolutely necessary that those vulnerabilities are taken care of, right? Whether there is any open source that is being, taken. Nowadays, we have seen that developers are using open source that are readily available because there is a pressure of releasing the product, right? The releases has to be done as per the dates that has been finalized, right? Because that's a demand that comes from the consumers. So keeping that into mind, we cannot compromise on those things, right? So hence product security becomes extremely important, and that's where when we speak about the infrastructure, we always speak about defense in depth, right? The similar concept comes when you are developing the product also, right? If you ingrain those security aspects at the initial stage itself, you understand that you need to say scan the codes, you need to test these codes, you need to test it by a third party so that you can have a different point of view. You also reset test release to your internal employees so that they understand that this is what the final output that we are looking as a product perspective, and this is what is the demand that we have seen from the market, right? So considering all those things, it becomes very important as far as product security development is concerned.
Absolutely. So Rajshri, I would like to bring you in here on this lifecycle approach. So from a digital banking solution perspective, right? What kind of conversations you have with your teams, especially as a product development leader, right? At each stage, and specifically, if you could shed a bit more light on the initial stage, because initial stage is perhaps the most crucial, as Rajesh and Naveen have also mentioned. So, what kind of conversations you have been having with your teams, from digital banking standpoint?
Thank you, Aditya. I think both Naveen and Rajesh have covered the multiple aspects of product security very well. Yeah. I would like to answer this with a small example that came in one of my conversations with my friend. So he was saying that you have to stand on the podium and scream cyber attack, cyber security to catch the attention of the audience 5 years before. But today, if you just whisper, hacking, vulnerability, okay, so dark web, data breach, you get the attention of the audience, in a jiffy. So that is the awareness and the importance that product security has got in today's scenario. As a product engineering leader, one thing that I always get asked is, how can you be agile and release your products faster if you are going to build more and more gates into your development life cycle, right? For example, security gates before you actually make a release to production. So this is what I answer. Consider this analogy. Why do you think we have brakes in a car? Why do we have brakes in a car? We do not have brakes in a car to enable the driver to stop the car when he hits an obstacle. The reason why there are brakes in a car is to enable the driver to drive at the pace that he wants to drive, fully aware that if I hit an obstacle, I can press the brakes and stop the car and save myself if I come to that situation. This is what I tell my teams, that good security controls are like brakes in your car. They are not meant to slow you down. They are meant to enable you to go faster, so that in case there is a breach, you can always rely back and fall back on your security controls to respond and recover faster and to be more resilient. Earlier, we used to say that, when we were moving from a waterfall development methodology to agile, we used to say that quality is everyone's responsibility. And today we are saying, or rather we are also saying, security is also everyone's responsibility. You see the way the shift has happened. Product security is not something that you can afford to think right at the time when you are shipping your code into production, or something that the customer gets to figure out after he starts using the product. Right? It is like going into an airport. You do not go and sit in the aircraft and then think about security, right? Are we all set? Are we safe and secure, to take off? Can we taxi? No. You have to show your ID card and, your boarding pass before you enter the gate. And then, you go through a baggage scan, you go through a personal frisking, and then your, boarding pass gets scanned, gets checked at multiple points. So product security today is like that. Right from the conceptualization stage by the product manager to the deployment, security is now woven into the entire development life cycle. To the extent that we call SDLC, which is software development life cycle, to secure development life cycle. So security is part and parcel of the entire supply chain. When the product managers are conceptualizing the product features or enhancements, they think about security. They also write NFRs, right? I mean, they write about security, they write about performance, they write about a lot of things, not just the feature functionalities from a domain or a functionality standpoint.
Yeah.
When we architect the solution for a new product or for an enhancement, that is secure by design principles. When an engineer develops, they adopt secure coding practices. Then there is security testing or secure testing practices, secure deployment practices. Everything made possible, by a highly intelligent and automated DevSecOps pipeline that ties the entire life cycle end to end. So that is what product security, today is all about. There are other tips and tricks that I can give you on what we actually do at a ground level to enable this, right? I mean, secure by design, secure by engineering, secure by testing, so on and so forth. Some of the things that we do and that have worked better for us that I would like to share with you are, we have security champions in every team. So these are not aliens who come from outside. I mean, we select people, who have a flair for security. They could be a product manager, they could be an architect, they could be a tester, or they could even be an intern, who's new into the entire ecosystem. To think about every process, to think about every step in the development life cycle, wearing the security lens. So they are the security champions. We train them, we support them, we empower them. And then, we do penetration tests to uncover vulnerabilities. There is code scan that runs, nightly. It is all completely automated. We follow a red team, blue team approach where within an agile team or within a project team, few people belong to the red team, so they look at everything in the product that is being developed with a hacker mindset. Right? They try to break the product. The blue team is the set of engineers who try to defend the red team from not being able to break into the product. So we follow that approach.
Yeah.
We reward good security hygiene. We do threat modeling to simulate real life scenarios as part of our development before we actually deploy, or we do that during the UAT stage. We run bug bounty programs. We open up our sandboxes, for finding out the vulnerabilities by, to a larger community, to the developer community, to a student community. We run hackathons to crowdsource ideas on how we can do better from a security posture standpoint. We work very closely with our enterprise information security team. I mean, they are the ones who do security audits. They also help us learn, from the breaches and the attacks that happens, in the other organizations, in other companies, and that helps to tighten the learning that we do or the education and awareness that we do to our developers so that whatever we ship is safe and secure. And all of us completely agree that product security is not a destination, it is a journey that we have to undergo every day and keep getting better at it.
Yeah, thank you, Rajshri. So I think, Naveen, I think you can easily pick it up from what Rajshri ended with. She referred to DevSecOps, of course. But I'm pretty sure that people in the room are familiar with the term DevSecOps and they're already working towards it. But my question to you would be, on ground, how do you actually operationalize DevSecOps? Because it also involves a fair degree of thinking, right? You had mentioned in our pre-discussions that shifting left or security as a whole getting shifted left. I think, both Rajesh and Rajshri have hinted towards it. But as a CISO of a fintech, what would be your guidance as to how organizations can go about operationalizing DevSecOps when we're talking about cloud native, right? Especially in the light of that, how do you go about putting it on ground?
Okay. So when it comes to, implementing DevSecOps, right? Today it's not DevSecOps, it's DevSec Privacy Ops because
Absolutely.
of DPDP Act, right?
Yes.
So primarily the paradigm shift is left shift, right? We are saying that, okay, it's always good to identify these gaps and vulnerability at the early stage of your code development.
Right.
Because at a later stage, if you identify the cost to fix a vulnerability would be almost 8 to 10 times, right?
Yeah.
So that cost, if you want to actually reduce, the only way is you go to the left,
Yeah.
identify the vulnerabilities and gaps at early stage, then fix it in your development cycle itself,
Yeah.
and then promote a stable code onto your subsequent environments and eventually
Right.
onto your production, right?
Right.
That's exactly DevSecOps is all about. Now, almost all the organizations had implemented DevOps, right? Now, what exactly DevSecOps? Incorporating security into the DevOps pipeline.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, in the new age, API, microservice, right? A lot of things come together, right? So you need a wide variety of toolings and capabilities to have a full-fledged DevSecOps pipeline or strategy to be put in place. My guidance to any organization want to primarily implement, not yet implemented, but wanted to implement, is there are open source tools available. You can start with a baseline. So you go and identify open source, DevSecOps tools. You may need to have skill set internally available. That's a primary condition, right?
Yeah.
You orchestrate those tools into your pipeline, right, at different stages. Then create a baseline DevSecOps strategy there and create a culture. Now you can buy a lot of enterprise tools, but your team may not be trained enough or are open enough to basically adopt that particular strategy, right? That's where most of the organization would fail. So the first thing an organization should focus is bringing the culture of integrating security tooling into your early stage of product development, identifying those gaps and vulnerabilities, then developers and the technical team open to basically receive that feedback early to get it put into their development cycle itself and then create a more secure and stable code, right? So you get through an open source based orchestration implemented DevSecOps, you would be able to create that culture first, right? If you have money, if you have larger team who can actually cater to building, let's say, enterprise grade DevSecOps, then there are a lot of enterprise tools available. Either you can go for the best in the class for each type of, let's say, scanning services you need for SCA for open source libraries, then SAST, right? SAST for, let's say, static code analysis, image scanning tools. There are different players who are best in all these aspects. You bring in the best enterprise tools, orchestrate it, and then create a DevSecOps. You need skill set and money, right? The money is very important when you go to enterprise. Now, you can build a DevSecOps pipeline and strategy, but maintaining it is very difficult. A lot of organizations fail there. They build it, they run it, 3 months down the line, okay, they see a lot of vulnerability, they are unable to actually accept those vulnerabilities to fix it in the early stages, then it actually piles up, right? Then eventually they realize all of a sudden they have too many vulnerabilities. If they try to fix it, then they won't be able to deliver, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it fails. That's where if you don't have the capability, then may go for an enterprise grade, let's say, orchestrated platform as a service, whereby you don't need to do it. You simply need to onboard, integrate into your pipeline. The tool will do a lot of things. Now, when it comes to all these scanning tools, one of the critical aspects we need to consider is false positive. The moment you implement a tool, right, either open source or enterprise, a lot of false positive would come. Now, it's very important to understand that, okay, false positive reduction is very important. Otherwise, what happens, the pile-up situation would come and then you will fail. So that's where I always suggest, okay, if you have the money and the talent, then go for enterprise tool. Why? Because they have already solved this problem. They have enabled AML-based kind of capabilities through which they could eventually identify, okay, if there is a finding, then whether that finding is already a false positive because they have connected system or they have already this learning available in their database, right, through which they would be able to identify. Eventually, if you actually receive a vulnerability, you go and mark it as a false positive. That feedback left shift based kind of approach, whereby we started with the open source based kind of approach to see how the baseline is, how the culture can be built. Then we slowly migrated to orchestrating tools with enterprise services. We recently actually migrated to the third stage, whereby bringing in an orchestrated ASPM platform, whereby it can actually take a lot of offloading, one. Then comes to, when we talk about product or application security, that's where the API security and application security, which is DAST, right? Dynamic application security, right? Where you will get tools available, similar cases, right? You integrate those tools. But as a fintech and or a bank, right? When you actually create a product, it's very important to understand that, okay, your product should be completely shouldn't have any kind of vulnerabilities, right? Now you may integrate certain scanning tools, but scanning tools doesn't guarantee full security in terms of identifying all the vulnerabilities. That's where penetration testing comes into picture. So there are players who actually integrate penetration testing as a service, primarily an extension of scanning. You can go with that as a baseline, but I would always recommend identify an empanel certain in Indian ecosystem, or RBI mandates that, okay, if you want to do a VAPT, then get an certain empaneled VAPT service provider and get the VAPT done, primarily the penetration testing done, so that they can actually do either white box, black box, or gray box testing based on your requirement, identify all those vulnerabilities, right? And then you can actually fix it. Now, specifically when it comes to banks, the moment you identify vulnerability, as long as the vulnerability is open, there is a process to report it to RBI, right? There is a mechanism in place. So that's why fintech, even though at times not all the fintechs comes under the regulatory, scenario, but then what happens is the moment you provide a product to a bank, contractually, you are actually liable to get almost all those guidelines to be implemented, right? So what we usually do is we get these third parties integrated into our system, then vulnerabilities identified. Of course, platform will have vulnerabilities. We fix it in the early stage on SLA-based kind of approach, and then ensure, okay, it's free of any kind of vulnerabilities, gaps, and then those can be shipped to our clients, including banks.
Got it. Rajesh, if you want to add to the DevSecOps from an architect standpoint, that in addition to what Naveen has already covered.
Correct. So just to add to what Mr. Naveen has already said, right? Yes, that approach is absolutely what is really important, is the shift left, and identifying and deploying the required tools and processes in place at the start itself. One thing what we have seen, or my experience have been, is that although you have all types of tools in place to put it in the entire DevSecOps cycle, there is still a manual intervention that is always required, and that is where the business logic assessment comes into the picture. So whatever codes you are developing, whatever product you are developing, there is always necessary that you always try to test the business logic of that application, right? What are the ways that any intruder can disrupt that business logic of that application that has been developed? So that is absolutely important, that needs to be done, and for that you need some level of manual intervention, some level of expertise who understands this and who's able to test that, right? And that has to be a third party, because a developer who does that, he may not have that thinking, or he may not have those ideas which a third party can bring in, where he may have an experience of doing this for multiple organizations. Now, going to the type of products where we have in the market for multiple solutions, right? Whether it is SAST, where we use it at the initial level of scanning of the code, or whether it is DAST, when the application is put into the production and you get a black box type of a testing, right? You are able to identify the user's perspective of how the product is behaving, right? But in between, what we have seen is that there is also an way where we also have to identify the SBOM, right? The software development lifecycle of the entire application, right? Whether we are using the right level of licenses, right? Because there is when we are developing a code, there is a possibility that you are using open source codes also, right? Now, how well are these codes being secured? Am I using the right set of licenses? We have seen in the Microsoft aspect, right, when we are using Windows systems, so many organizations have been penalized because they have not used the proper version of Windows that has been running, right? Choosing the right product is also absolutely important, and it's also necessary to see that how the organization is developing on the product, because we have seen of late there are so many mergers, demergers happening. What is their focus on this particular product? How well are they working on the patch development? How well are they improving the database of their vulnerabilities? Absolutely important, right? If there is no version updates happening, if there is no patches that has been developed, which means there is no focus that is taking place. So selecting the right set of product when you're developing the applications and integrating those security solutions is absolutely important. The second aspect is the APIs part, which Mr. Naveen had touched upon, is today you see each and everything, whether it is available for integration, it is either API. If it is not available out of the box, still there is API, because there is efforts that would be done by the development team. The point I'm trying to make is that today there are APIs that are available externally to vendors, contractors, and even consumers. So how do you protect those APIs, right? So it is extremely important to identify that what are the APIs that are approved by an organization and what are the APIs that are actually discovered in your environment, right? We have seen, my experience says that we have seen so many organizations that there are APIs that has been exposed which is not yet approved by the organizations at all. So what do you do with these APIs? Why are these being exposed? Do I have any control on the number of APIs that has been used for integrating? Is there any rate limit that has been set up? If there are number of API calls being done, am I able to identify if there is any kind of bot attacks done on the API attack? Because in the end, today you have intruders or adversaries trying to attack these APIs and trying to get those personal identified information also, right? So it's extremely, extremely important that those APIs that are exposed towards the internet world or the APIs that are used for integration between devices, that is also being protected equally when we are talking about the DevSecOps lifecycle also, right? So that's my 2 cents when the DevSecOps is concerned and as far as the API security is also concerned.
Got it. So, one other aspect of product security which we as DSC are also looking at is because we have been working with different organizations and helping them out as to how they can strengthen their product security incident response teams, the PSIRT as we call it. And a lot of OEMs and other organizations have started working on either building one or maybe upgrading the capabilities that they have within the incident response team, especially from a product security standpoint. So I'll start with you, Rajesh, and then perhaps move to Naveen. So how can organizations actually go about strengthening this PSIRT if they haven't already set up one, or if they were to set it up from the scratch, or they have to upgrade the existing ones?
Correct. So from the incident response team, it actually, my thought is that there are 2 aspects of it, right? Madam already said that they have a good set of team internally who are capable enough of managing, right? And there are a second set of organization who don't have the required skill sets. So having the right sets of skill sets who are capable enough of responding to those incidents, who understand the product and who have those thought process to analyze those incidents is extremely, extremely important. So if you have the right set of skill sets, you can go for the on-site or you can develop your inbuilt team. And if you do not have, there are organizations like us and multiple other organizations who can give you those right set of skill sets, who can help you to build up your incident response team, right? Building from scratch is not an easy job, right? Because you need to understand the culture, you need to understand the product, you need to understand the employee awareness, how they use the product, how they react when there is any kind of incident. Do you have the process in place? Is the process documents being updated on a yearly basis? Is there a version control set in place? So if you don't have the process in place, still you have the people, it's not going to help you out, right? We have seen in multiple organizations, there are set of team members, but then when there are incidents happen, they go hayway, right? So the roles and responsibilities of multiple team members needs to be defined at the early stage itself, right? The third aspect is, again, I'll take a cue from what Madam said, is employee awareness. Absolutely, absolutely important that every employee is aware about what product they are using or what they are selling it to their consumers. If they understand what the product they are using and what that is being sold to their consumers, they will be able to give better inputs, they will be able to react in the right manner, right? And there are ways to test the employee awareness also, right? You can have phishing simulations created, you can have the red teaming, blue teaming exercise for your internal teams also. You can have some small competitions done, right, to identify that who is responding better in case of those attacks. The third aspect that comes is that although you build a team, motivating the team is absolutely important, because we have seen the iteration rates also that happens when this incident response team is being built. So motivating them, giving them those simulation tasks, giving them various knowledge bases where they can build this is absolutely important, so that they keep on motivating and they see that there are new things that they are able to learn, right? Yeah. Once this incident response team is also developed, it's all improved over the period of time.
Right. So, Naveen, product security, we are all aware of incident response in general, right? Incident response plans, everything. I think that's been talked about at length. But Product security incident response. Do you think it differs from the incident response in general, the incident response plan which an organization has, or any peculiarities associated with product security incident response that you would like to bring out, or it could be taken care of in the larger thing only?
I mean, few organizations actually combine it with the larger incident response plan and strategy, while few organizations actually separate it. It may be a subset of it, right? If you talk about incident response, today it's not only incident response, it's also incident prevention, right? That's where the SOC comes into picture, whereby you bring in right toolings like SIEM, Security Information and Event Management Services. Then you actually leverage a lot of log sources, right? If you're hosting the platform on cloud, then you may leverage the logs coming from infrastructure, right? Now, when it comes to product security, it's not only the infrastructure, the application, the core application asset also comes into the picture. So you may build capabilities within your application to identify certain patterns, errors, scenarios, which could potentially be an indicator of a threat, right?
Yeah.
Then you primarily log those, then create a log source out of it, and then leverage that log source into your SIM kind of tooling. Then
Right.
on top of that, you will create primarily a SOC operations, right?
Right.
I mean, that's one way of achieving it. That's how credible as a fintech we are doing it, right? So the comprehensive security, including infrastructure, application, leverage through a SOC. Now, I mean, you could actually build a team, SOC team internally, but the primary challenge is talent, right? Having it, even though we say it's response, when you hear about response, you simply say that I see an alert, somebody need to respond, right? It's not only a response. You need to primarily do the analysis, troubleshooting, then eventually at times you need to contain and eliminate it, right? That's the scope of that particular team. So primarily having the in-depth technical skill set to manage a SOC or incident response team is very limited today. So if you try to build such a team internally, either you may not be able to find the right talent pool, one. Even if you are able to find the talent, retaining the talent is a challenge, right? So my suggestion is, okay, if you are a smaller organization, maybe you may need to have somebody with experience who could be part of your internal SOC, but it is always advisable to outsource your SOC to an established player, right? I mean, what you need to do is you need to do the third-party risk assessment and everything to ensure that the third-party caters to security. The service they offer is actually secure, right? You are protected from that third-party supply chain-related security aspects, right? Incredible, what we do is generally we have an internal team who actually takes care of the internal aspect, while the entire SIM and SOC are managed by a third party. Third party do the first level of analysis assessment. In case they see, okay, there is a pattern of, threat identified, then they actually engage our internal team, because internal teams usually know the business context, right?
Yeah.
If you externalize everything, they may not have the full context, and even if they act on it, then it may not be the right way of acting on an incident, right? So it's a collaboration that will happen whereby you split responsibilities into multiple functions, internal and external. Then overall, it would be part of your incident management process, whereby in your plan, you will mention that, okay, if it is the business operational incident management, you follow this particular process or procedure. If it is your application or product, incident management, then you follow another set of guidelines, right? So you will have this subsection within your plan. It's all about having the plan. So identifying, okay, what is the plan? What are the risks you may identify or come across, creating different plans. And most of the organizations have the plan, but you need to test it to identify the effectiveness. So at least conducting incident response trials at least once in a year to identify whether the plan itself is functional, it's effective. If that needs some kind of optimization, then do that.
Yeah.
So incredible, we do this exercise to identify the effectiveness, then do mock trials to identify whether the SOC itself is operational, effective or not, right? So there are multiple ways to achieve it. Primarily, if you ask me, a hybrid approach would be more reliable, because then talent, cost, and then skill set aspects you can actually balance it.
Yeah. So I have to be cognizant of the time as well, but Rajshri, because I know I'm pretty much at the last leg of questions that we had agreed upon. Rajshri, as a product leader, the key recommendations, I know roadmaps cannot be built in a jiffy, right? It has to be a well thought through process. But, especially from a digital banking standpoint or digital banking product standpoint. So what would be your core recommendations even to start thinking about the product security roadmap for a financial sector?
That's a great question to close today's session, Aditya. In my opinion, there are two types of financial institutions. One set that have gone through a cyber attack or a data breach, and the another set of institutions that have still not even found out that they have had an attack or a data breach. So that's the beauty, right? I mean, I read a report that says that financial institutions can take up to weeks or months to even understand that, there is a malicious attack on their system. So cybersecurity, in my opinion, is not a technology problem. It is a business problem that requires strategic investments by the business to ensure your security posture is maintained at an optimum level. And again, by a security posture, I don't think your security posture should be all about threat elimination. I think that is impossible, but it should always be about measured risk taking. There are a lot of technology advancements, a lot of products that are available. You look at the wonderful stalls, that are as part of this conclave that will help you harden your application security, your endpoint security, infrastructure security, so on and so forth. But in my opinion, the most vulnerable asset that an organization can have, and that requires investments, to ensure that they're not exposed to security breaches, is people. So people security management is very important. I'll give you a small example why. Assuming we go to a mall, after you complete your purchase, you go and do the billing. The person at the counter, after he or she completes the billing, innocently asks you for your mobile number, right? And you don't even think before giving your mobile number. We don't even ask, why do you need my mobile number to complete a billing of a cloth that I purchased or any gadgets that I purchased? Absolutely not needed. And that mobile number that you are giving out is linked to your Aadhaar card, it is linked to your bank account, it is linked to your PAN card. And if you leave your mobile number on the database of multiple merchants, and if they go via a data breach, then all your mobile number is going to be there on the dark web. Again, from an internal employee standpoint, they are your first line of defense. From an external people standpoint, your clients. So I think a lot of investments have to go through into people security management in terms of creating, that awareness and feedback loop to your employees via multiple exercises that Rajesh listed out. And also, how are you going to invest in terms of protecting your end customers or end users in better authentication mechanisms, so on and so forth. So that will be my recommendation, right? I mean, a place that requires investment and innovation today is people security management.
Right. Rajesh, your 2 cents.
So, considering the roadmap, the thought process is that we have seen what pandemic has done, right, for multiple organizations. It changed the entire landscape. They had to rework on their entire infra. They had to rework on their way the business is being conducted because they were not used to such kind of a scenario. So, considering any product development, if there is a roadmap, it has to consider the future, what the future may demand, right? How I can ingrain security in it and how the layers of security protocols can be enhanced considering the future and the scalability, right? Irrespective of what the location is, irrespective of what the user ground is, the development is to be in such a way that it has to cater to what we foresee in the future. And secondly, the required 3 things that are really important is visibility, control, and context, right? Whatever development you do, I need to have the context, right? From the business perspective, from the threat perspective, and from the risk perspective. And then once I correlate all those things, I need to know what is my incident that has been prioritized. What is the incident I can prioritize, right? And the last and important point is whatever I develop in the end, I need a single pane of glass, right? To understand that how mature is my product. What is the risk levels that my product carries? How can I improve my product portfolio? And how can I, ensure that it meets the demand of my consumers?
Right. Naveen? Yes. In 1 minute, if you could just wrap it up.
So primarily, my suggestion, if you want to implement comprehensive product security is, okay, baseline it based on some kind of standard. For example, ISO 27001 or similar, right? It beautifully talks about different aspects of, security, right? Primarily product security also. So it talks about having security in the project management itself to start with identifying what are the aspects of security to be incorporated into your product design, implementation, delivery, and maintenance, right? So take such a kind of baseline, then identify what are the different aspects you can actually integrate into your ecosystem to enable a comprehensive product security, right? Then from the start, get it implemented. From project planning to design to development to testing to deployment to then final delivery, and thereafter through continuous monitoring, through let's say these kind of SOC or threat response capabilities, you actually monitor, optimize, and then eventually ensure the product is secure and can be shipped and used by your end customers.
Right. So I'll have to conclude the conversation. So first of all, thank you so much, Rajshri, Naveen, Prajesh, for joining us. So I would urge all of you to watch out the product security space of DSCI. The reason I say this is because we have full intention of, as we speak, we are building a plan in the background as to bring different stakeholders, because we are trying to map out the entire value chain and not just limiting to the financial sector, but the automotive, the hardware piece also. We are going really strong on that front. So watch out for the product security space. And although we couldn't take up questions, but that shouldn't stop you from interacting with the folks off stage. Thank you so much. Deepak, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Aditya. Just be on stage, the panelists.